Dear Professor Draghi, caro Mario, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we mark 1 year since the Draghi report was released. But let me go back for a moment to 2 years ago, when I first called you, Mario, to propose that you embark on this new mission. And I remember you were intrigued by the offer, but you set one condition. You said this new report had to make a real difference. And you said you were not interested in writing, I quote you, another academic paper. You wanted a roadmap for action. And that was exactly what we are looking for. You and your team invested a full year to dig into Europe's strengths, into Europe's shortcomings, and how we could address them. And as soon as the report was out, all of Europe turned its ears to you. So first of all, I want to thank you, dear Mario, for your rigor, for your vision, and for your service to Europe. Grazie, Mario. My new Commission took office 9 months ago. The first act of the new mandate was our Competitiveness Compass. The Competitiveness Compass translates the report into practical policies. And then we hit the ground running with the Clean Industrial Deal, AI Gigafactories, the new state aid framework, the Affordable Energy Plan, the Savings and Investment Union, tailor-made action plans for sectoral industries like the car industry, steel and chemicals, the greatest surge in defence investment in our history, new proposals on the single market, the Scale-up and Start-up Fund and Quantum, and 6 simplification packages on their way. This is the urgency mindset we promised. Now we have to convince our co-legislators because they have to agree, and we will relentlessly stay the course until we get it all done. But today, I do not want to focus on how many initiatives and strategies we've adopted. I want to focus on the real impact on the ground, because that's the one and only thing that really matters. We know that competitiveness is about jobs. It is about good salaries for people. It is about good profits for companies. It's basically about our European way of life. And I want to address one by one the 3 pillars of the Draghi report. The first one is closing the innovation gap. The second is the joint plan for decarbonization and competitiveness. And the third pillar is reducing our dependencies. Let me start with innovation. And let me start with the positive before I come to the challenges. Today, the global competition for technological leadership is being fundamentally reshaped by artificial intelligence. And this new AI race has only just begun. So global leadership is still up for grabs. And Europe is not only a challenger, but a leader in many fields that will define that race. Take computing power, for example. Europe has some of the best supercomputers in the world. And even though tech giants across the world continue to build larger and faster computers, we have managed to strengthen our global ranking. Just to give you a few figures, 6 years ago, we had 2 supercomputers in the global top 10. Then at the beginning of my first mandate, we decided to massively invest in high-performance computing. Today, we have 4 supercomputers in the global top 10, thanks to the launch in the last year of Jupiter in Germany and HPC 6 in Italy. So our policies and investments in this field are starting to pay off. My second point is that Europe is well positioned in the world of AI adoption. We have started using AI to boost productivity, and I mention that because this is precisely where Europe had failed 30 years ago, when our companies were too slow to digitalize and to go online. This time, Europe is not playing catch-up. We are among the front runners. European companies are top of the league on many AI applications. And I think it's good to look at one impressive example, that is Lovable, the Swedish app. It's an app that turns ideas into fully functioning apps for websites. Last summer, Lovable became the fastest software company in history to reach $100 million in annual revenue. Today, it is valued almost $4 billion. Last June, 10% of all new websites in the world were made with Lovable. This is just one example, but there are many other European AI success stories, from healthcare to defense. I know that the French champion Mistral is here with us today. In 2025, the number of European businesses adopting AI has risen by 67% year on year. So this is where we can truly engage in this race. But we need to capitalize on our strength. We need to put our digital infrastructure at the service of industry and innovators. And this brings me back to the supercomputers, the infrastructure. We have created AI factories, and we will soon be upgrading the best of them into gigafactories. And the aim is that our amazing innovative startups can access this computing power and can test and train their models, especially thinking about sectorial applications. And the response of the private sector in Europe has been impressive. Our initial goal was to mobilize around about 20 billion euros in investment to develop the gigafactories. We received 230 billion euros in proposals from the private sector. And later today, during this conference, we will sign the first pilot projects. Of course, the rest of the world is racing too. We also know that global investments are skyrocketing. So we must stay focused. We must put our shoulder to the wheel. This is not a mission accomplished. This is the mission of the next decade, to make Europe one of the leading AI continents. And in your report, Mario, you said we need to create a virtuous circle where investment feeds innovation and innovation attracts more investment. And this is the core idea behind our new Competitiveness Fund. It will be the centerpiece of the next European budget, with a proposed firepower of over 400 billion euros. That includes a rise of twice more money for research, the 170 billion we have prepared for Horizon Europe, 5 times more money than today for digital, 6 times more for clean tech. I think this is an investment to boost our industry that Europe needs now, and we are here to convince now European Parliament and the European Council of the value of this investment. Now, coming to the challenges. Of course, I know how many obstacles still remain. Take an AI startup from Portugal or from Romania. They must be able to grow seamlessly across our continent, but we know that this is not the case. Our single market is far from being completed. You know the famous number that the IMF has calculated. The internal barriers within the single market are an equivalent of 45% tariffs on goods, and if it comes to services, 110% tariffs on services if we look at the effect these internal barriers have on our single market. This cannot be. It should not be easier to find a fortune across an ocean than across a European border. And we have started to address these barriers. We have addressed them with the so-called Terrible 10, with our single market strategy. But now we must deliver with a matter of urgency, and this is why we have announced a single market roadmap to 2028. The aim is here to increase the pace and to speed up the processes. And this roadmap will connect our work on capital markets, on services, on energy, on telecoms, on the fifth freedom for knowledge and innovation, as well as the 28th regime for the innovative companies, with concrete timelines, deadlines, goals to reach. Because we all know only what gets measured gets done. Ladies and gentlemen, the second pillar of the Draghi report is a joint plan for decarbonisation and competitiveness. That starts with bringing down energy costs. We know the core reason why we pay higher bills than our competitors. Europe is too dependent on imported fossil fuels. And this means that the cost of our energy is dictated by global markets. But we also know the solution. And this is homegrown energy, renewables with nuclear as a base load. That gives us energy security. That gives us independence as it is homegrown, and actually it creates good jobs in Europe. And in the last year alone, we have achieved impressive progress. First, we launched a wind package that is cutting permitting times by 2/3. In the first half of 2025, investment in Europe, in European wind energy, hit an all-time high, more than 40 billion euros. So investors are choosing Europe. And another good news, by now over 70% of our electricity comes from low-carbon sources. As a result, last year, we reduced our fossil fuel bill by over 60 billion euros. So we have to cut prices and dependencies at the same time. But let me be very clear. Our energy prices remain still far too high, too volatile, too disparate across Europe. In some member states, electricity costs are 3 times more than in others. And many price spikes could be avoided if energy could flow more freely to where it is needed. But we also know that national grids are still not well integrated. Too often we lack the necessary interconnectors, or we don't make efficient use of those we have. Now, we have started to address this. Just last week, the European Parliament has approved our proposal to use cohesion funds to boost energy infrastructure. Many projects are already advancing. We have, for example, the Celtic interconnector that will soon end Ireland's isolation from the European grid. Or we have the Biscay Bay project to double capacity between France and Spain. And in addition, we will propose a grids package and a new energy highways initiative that will focus on 8 critical bottlenecks that we have identified in our energy infrastructure. So from the Pyrenees to the Trans-Balkan pipeline, from the Øresund Strait to the Sicilian Canal, we will liberate these bottlenecks one by one, and we will step up with funding where necessary. Mario, you dedicated a chapter to the clean transition. It is a vast opportunity for our industries. The global market for batteries is expected to double, for example, in size over the next 5 years. The global market for wind turbines continues to rise by over 10% every year. And the global market for electric cars is booming. If you look at the European Union, sales are up almost 25% year on year. If you look across Africa, Asia and Latin America, the electric vehicle sales rose by 60% in 2024. So this is, first of all, good news for the climate. But the question is, do we want to reap the economic benefits of it, or do we want others to take a growing share of these rising new markets? And I have not the slightest doubt about the answer. Because when I speak to the global south, from Africa to India to Central Asia, they are all suffering from climate change. They are all looking for solutions. And Europe can be home to front-runner industries that can export exactly these solutions to others. So we should be the industrial powerhouse that meets this growing demand for clean tech. We know that this is not a given. We know that the figures are not as encouraging as in other sectors. Too often we are losing jobs and market share to non-market economies. But we can still turn the tide. And this is why we have to massively boost our public and private investment. This is why we have to create lead markets for circular and clean products. And this is why we have to secure level playing fields for our industries. Europe must protect its industries. They are front runners in the race to decarbonize. They are doing the right thing. And they should be incentivized and rewarded. Otherwise, we risk again to rely on others to import the steels our car makers need. Or we rely on others to import the cement our builders need. And we would again be at the mercy of price, volume and quality that others are willing and able to provide. And this is why we have to focus on the sectors that are the most strategic for us. With the Clean Industrial Deal, for example, we're tackling the main hurdles that slow these sectors down. We are, for example, working on a battery booster package, as batteries are a key enabler of all other clean tech. This will put 1.8 billion euros up for equity to expand production in Europe. So this work goes to the heart of Europe's independence. And that leads me, ladies and gentlemen, to the third pillar in the Draghi report, independence, or let's say dependencies, as you called it. In this last year, we have seen export controls from China bringing production lines in Europe to a halt. Today, a single country controls 75% of the processing of cobalt, 90% for rare earth, 100% for graphite. And this is a critical situation without any doubt. But as always in life, that is nothing that is inevitable. So with the right policies, we can shore up our security. It will take time. But that's the path to build independence. And this is what Europe is up to today. First, with diversification. We can look at other markets. In the last year alone, we have reached new trade deals, as you know, with Mercosur, with Mexico, with Switzerland. The agreement with Mercosur, for instance, will create a market of 770 million consumers. It's 1/4 of the global GDP. We secured an initial agreement with a mining giant like Indonesia. We're now in talks with India, and we want to conclude before the end of the year. Strong political commitment on my side, strong political commitment on Modi's side. We're advancing with South Africa, Malaysia and United Arab Emirates, just to name a few. Our economic security has a crucial role in all of these trade deals. And we know that together with trade comes investment, We're securing or building networks of strategic projects across the world. Let me give you two examples. For example, nickel in Canada. That is enough to power over 800,000 electric vehicle batteries every year. Or we have agreed with Kazakhstan graphite for 100,000 electric vehicles batteries every year. Or look at the strategic Lobito corridor to Africa's copper belt. All these are the first successful moves to diversify and important steps to our independence. Of course, and I don't want to neglect that one, our work on economic security and independence begins right here at home. So this year we selected 47 strategic projects across Europe under our Critical Raw Materials Act, and we will focus our financial support on these critical endeavours, and we will ensure that all the permitting is done in due time. So I'm speaking of copper and cobalt mining in Finland, for example. I'm speaking of lithium processing in Portugal, or the battery recycling in Italy. Let me focus in particular on recycling. The circular economy is central to our security of supply. Just let me give you three figures. Already today, every kilogram of raw materials, if you take it, we produce 33% more output than the United States and 400% more output than China. Just think about the potential competitive advantage if we manage to scale up this. So the best answer here is creating a truly circular economy. So we are working on a Circular Economy Act. And what we will do is we will start in those sectors that are already ready, like the batteries, for example, because we know that circular production limits our strategic dependency and, more important even, it enables front-runner industries that can export the solutions I was just talking about to others. So we can literally turn waste into the critical enabler of our competitiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude with a final example on reducing our dependencies. And there is another vital sector where we can no longer afford to be excessively reliant on others, and that is defense. Of course, a more independent Europe of defense won't happen overnight. And I want to say right at the beginning, there's a strong alignment with NATO. But it is also crystal clear that Europe must now carry the lion's share of its own security. And this is why we have launched Readiness 2030 to mobilize up to 800 billion euros in defense investment. And this includes, these 800 billion euros include 150 billion euros for an instrument we call SAFE. That's an instrument for joint procurement for the member states. It is on track to be the most successful instrument on defense, and it took only 72 days to approve the SAFE loans. From the idea and the launch, our proposal to the approval, 72 days. And in less than 6 months, we have already assigned the total amount of 150 billion euros in loans. I think this is an example that shows that is the sense of urgency we need. And I wish I could see the same sense of urgency all across our competitiveness agenda. We need urgent action to face urgent needs because our companies and workers can no longer wait. Take our simplification efforts. In every meeting I have with business, it's always their top request, and rightly so. And in the 9 months, we have presented 6 simplification packages. You know, we call them omnibuses. Two more are on their way, that will be on the digital and on the military mobility. They will make a real difference, with less paperwork, less overlaps, less complex rules. Our proposal will cut 8 billion euros a year of bureaucratic costs for European companies. But it has already been a long time since the omnibuses hit the road. Now they need to reach their destination. They need an urgent approval by the co-legislators. And the same goes for many other proposals, from the Savings and Investment Union to several trade agreements. Of course, we also, as a Commission, have to do our homework. Just to mention one example, that is competition policy. We have discussed an overhaul of the competition policy for a while. So the direction of travel is clear. And that's why we will have to advance the publication of the merger guidelines. I think it's now time to deliver. And I'm absolutely convinced that Europe can unite around this agenda. Every single member state has endorsed the Draghi report, and so has the European Parliament. We all know what needs to be done. We all know that business as usual does not work anymore. And this is my final message today. This is also what the people of Europe expect from us. They expect our democracy to decide, to act, and to deliver. And I know that Europe can make it, because we have already shown what is possible. We can move mountains when we have the ambition, the unity, and the urgency. It's our choice, so let us make that choice again, for prosperity, for independence, and in general for Europe. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.